Welcome to the 2020 Blitzalytics Top 5 Prospects by Position. And here's your host, Jack Bourgeois and Roy Countryman.
Welcome again, Roy. Thanks for tuning in or coming in for us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Jack. We're really knocking these top 5 prospect video series out. We had 2 impressive showings already. Hopefully we can get through a third here and keep rolling until we get all the position groups for the draft nation out there.
Let's do it. We got the top 5 tight ends. So without further ado, let's dive on into it. Actually, before we do that, I do got to ask you, consensus, around the draft community, Clemente is a top 5 tight end at the very least. A lot of people have him, even inside Blitzalytics, have him number 1 on their board. Where are you with this Clemente? Because I do not see him inside your top 5, sir.
Clemente is not in my top 5. He's even in the peripherals of the top maybe 10, 8. I'm just not a big fan of Clemente right now. I'm not sold on his athleticism. And maybe that's just because he's somewhat raw on the field, because he focused a lot of his time and effort in the baseball community at Notre Dame. So, but to me, he's more of a plodding type. He gives decent effort as a blocker. If you want, he's almost similar type of effect of what I had feelings-wise for Noah Fant last year. I wasn't a fan of Noah Fant because he was simply just an oversized receiver and not wanting to have a lot of effort as a blocker. So at least Komet has a little bit better going for him as a blocker. He has a little bit more want-to. But unless you're just drafting as a pure pass target, as a big frame, I'm not sold on him.
All right, let's jump into our top 5s.
Number 5, Josiah Guerra, out of Cincinnati.
All right, we start off with Josiah Guerra. This guy he's been a playmaker for Cincinnati Bearcats for the last few years. He redshirted his first year with the Bearcats. Then he played in all 12 games on special teams and as a reserve. Then he started really breaking out in 2018. He started 13 games. He caught 38 passes. He averaged over 12 yards a clip, had 5 scores. And in his final year, he was voted first team All-League AAC for his play in 14 starts. He had 39 receptions, 504 yards, just under 13 yards a catch, and 7 touchdowns. This guy's this tight end, what really makes his upside to me is his versatility. He's a unique athlete. He's not the tallest guy. He just stands a little bit over 6'2". But his fluidity and ability to fit on blocks in space is really what did it for me. His ability to wham block from the flex tight end position was outstanding. He has great feel to how to get open, especially in zone. And he just has a real feel to take yards after the catch as well. He has a lot of quickness, the ability to get in and out of routes. He was able to sell it. Real sure hands, can really contort his body and has great body control for a tight end. And he barely dropped any passes that I've seen on tape that I watched. So he's just a real quality pass catcher, but he can be a versatile weapon as a flex tight end or in line. He gives great effort, can shoot his hands on contact, and run those feeds. That's really where his strengths lie as a player.
From what little film I've been able to watch, like you said, it's just the fluidity as an athlete. You never see him kind of overstep. You never see him stumble. He's a natural athlete. He wears his weight very well. He's big, strong, physical, athletic, but not too big, not too slow. He's not a slug. I mean, you see it on the film. He's an athlete, and when you see that and you have that at the tight end position, I think that's most important. You get that basketball type of player who's big, strong, and physical, and probably could have been playing, high school or college ball or basketball. I mean, and you just see it on the film.
Yeah, and just to hit a couple of his weaknesses, he was able to block in line at Cincinnati in the AAC, but graduating to the NFL level, that's really going to be a question mark with his frame at only a little bit over 6'2". It doesn't have a lot of bulk, so if you're not going to want to consistently put him in line. You're going to want to probably place him as the flex, or maybe even as a fullback at some placements, because of his ability to use his athleticism in space and fit on second-level defenders. That's really where you want to get him at. He also didn't run a a wide variety of routes, but he was used in the slot. So he was somebody that was the quarterback's friend. He always looked to him on third downs to, move the chains. But I'm not sold that his ability to separate at the next level is going to be the same as it was in Cincinnati. So that's something to monitor going forward. But the tight end class as a whole, in my opinion, is good, not great. So this is more along the lines of I'm so sold on him on his blocking in space and really ability to be used as a mismatch in certain situations. That's why I have him at 5 here.
Yeah, to me, I mean, he's definitely one of those guys that he does a little bit of everything, but it doesn't flash off the screen. He's not eye-popping in any traits, but he's a good, solid tight end prospect that, he's only going to get better once he gets into the NFL level.
Yeah, and that kind of reflects on our big board ranking. He's not ranked by any of our scouts right now in the top 50. For me, I have him as a day 3 prospect. Really, you'll want to be keeping an eye out for him around the rounds like 4 or 5, maybe in round 6, just because of people being concerned with his height. But his athleticism is enough to warrant a pick in that round 4 to round 5 range. And a couple of teams that could really eye him up is the Steelers. Could block out in space. They like to wham block and use counter traps. He'd be really effective there. The Eagles could use him in a Trey Burton kind of role. The Chiefs as well. Patriots definitely know how to use these guys, kind of the undersized, but know how to get open players. So the Patriots, the Packers are another, and even the Colts. They always seem to be able to find a way to maybe not have the best athlete, but guys that are really solid across the board and find production out of them. If you're looking for what we're projecting for his rookie year, really what you're going to be asking out of him is to be a special teams contributor from week 1. And he has that tenacity. You can see on some of his blocking reps that he'll be able to run down the field and cover kicks quite well and be at number 3 tight end. And he might get some looks as a pass catcher on certain, certain sub packages maybe and certain looks that you have him in on. Talking about a career floor and potential, the floor is similar to what I see as rookie projection. It's a special teams contributor, a rotational pass catcher, that number 3 tight end. It's tucked in at the back of your roster on the 53. That's really where I see his floor, just because of his versatility. He'll find a role to fit on a roster for probably 6 to 8 years, and just wear a lot of hats and not have to be committed to maybe 2 to 3 players. He has a lot of skills that can hold up that end of the bargain. Whereas if he hits on all cylinders, I could see him being a mid-level starting tight end at the next level due to that athleticism and blocking prowess in space.
Do you guys think that there's any specific team or situation this guy could go to and be an impact player this season, or is this just totally a project, see what happens, see how it pans out?
I think he hit the nail on the head with the Colts. What they can do with a Jack Doyle type, what they can do, they're always finding guys and turning them in from, they no longer have Eric Ebron. They could use another athletically gifted tight end, but somebody who's not, he's not a Darren Waller. He's not going to take the top off. He's not some freak athlete. He's just a good athlete, and a really good athlete for the position especially.
Yeah, and that's a pretty good place is the Colts, or I could really see the Patriots finding a way to like him, being that Devlin had so many issues as a fullback, and he could really wear them, multiple hats for them, to where he could be a flex tight end, maybe get some fullback reps, and still be a versatile chess piece as a pass catcher out of the backfield or as a flex tight end. So I really like the Patriots fit for them, but the Colts I could definitely see as well, and those are 2 teams in that span of the 4th or 5th, maybe 6th round at latest, that you're going to see him plucked off the board. My player comp for him, and this would be the ceiling, would be like a Trey Burton type. I already mentioned him a little bit. He has that athleticism, not the tallest guy, not the fastest guy, just does a lot of things well and can, wear a lot of different hats for your offense.
I like it. Let's move on through.
Number 4, Hunter Bryant, tight end, Washington.
All right, so Hunter Bryant, this guy is just he's a weird case to be studying. He's only 21 years old, coming out of Washington. He showed great promise as a freshman initially with Washington. He started 5 of 9 games. He racked up 22 receptions for over 15 yards at catch and a touchdown, but he missed the end of that year with a gruesome knee injury that involved the torn ACL and an MCL. He also then followed that up with an injury in the next spring where he tore the meniscus in his knee. It delayed his sophomore season. It only allowed him to play five games in total, and he had 11 receptions in total, but he had a staggering average of 21.6 yards and a touchdown. Finally, then this past season, he stayed healthy for the duration. He showed off that big league talent that he had in his freshman year, and it paved the way for a second-team Associated Press All-American selection, as well as being named the first-team All-Pac-12. And he was also one of the finalists for the John Mackey Award, which is the nation's top tight end. He had 52 receptions, 825 yards receiving. He averaged 15.9 yards a catch and 3 touchdowns in those games. And this guy he's an athlete first and foremost. When he initially broke on the scene as a freshman, everybody was lauding him as a first-round pick in the making because of his ability to be a physical mismatch. His speed, quickness, he knows how to get open horizontally across the field. He can win on the intermediate and short areas and then win after the catch. And he also has the speed to push the field vertically and get behind those safeties and make sure they're taking notice of him running those 9 routes up the seam. So he's somebody that's an impressive player when he's tracking the ball. He has great ball skills. He averaged over 16 yards a catch during his college career. He knows how to get open. He knows how to use small and subtle head fakes. He is savvy at getting open in zone. He knows how to sit down or keep running through. And his hands are sudden and safe. They're sure-handed. He doesn't have a lot of drops. And he ran a pretty good variety of routes at Washington. They asked their tight ends, as they're well known for the ones that they put in the league, that they're well-rounded athletes and also technicians. So he's okay in the concept of blocking. He just simply does not have the skill set to be an inline blocker at this time or due to his size. So, Jack, do you have anything to say on Hunter Bryant here?
I mean, you are the tight end expert. I've barely got to watch the film on these guys, but from what I have seen, he's one of those, he's too big to be a wide receiver, too small to be an inline blocker as a tight end. I think he would have, if he was, 15 pounds lighter, I think he would be, again, in this conversation as one of the best wide receivers in the class, or, amongst these big-name wide receivers. What I noticed from seeing the film is that he sells the play action extremely well. They would ask him to block for that split second before rolling out. Whether it was the in a play action format and him doing the wheel route as we seen just a second ago. He can high point the ball very well. He's super athletic, a lot more athletic than the guy we had previous, and I think he is going to be one of those red zone threats, one of those not a number one tight end to start off his career, but could eventually, if he is able to put on a little bit more weight, able to put on a little bit more size to be that inline blocker, could easily be a number one tight end for one of the 32 teams in the NFL.
Yeah, and just to touch a little bit on his weaknesses, you hit it right there. He's very lean. He doesn't have a lot of bulk. He's got real, as scouts like to say, tiny ankles. So you question his ability to be able to put on that kind of bulk. If you're going to ask him to consistently line up in line, I just don't see that as being the best version of him. If you're drafting Hunter Bryant, you're going to use him in a specific method. He's going to be very dependent on your play calling. And I just think he's well equipped to be a wham blocker, similar to Guerra earlier. He's very dependent on being able to block at the second level of defenders or even defensive backs because he has the athleticism to mirror them in space. But his ability to block in line against defensive ends and even heavy-handed outside linebackers, he's going to get taken advantage of and taken to town quite consistently. So if you're using him as a pass catcher and using that athleticism, that's what you're really drafting right here. And the other thing you got to take into effect that's what's going to kind of knock him is that devastating knee injury. We just seen a player in Todd Gurley kind of get knocked and initially in the draft now, and he got cut by the Rams, of having an issue with his knee to where it's at. You really have to question how much durability is left in that knee after the injury, not only in his freshman year, but he followed up with a meniscus tear in the spring after. that's going to be a red flag. It needs to be addressed. If it gets approved, then he might see his draft stock come up a little bit. But right now, he's somebody that you're really looking for a specific role in your team as an athletic pass catcher. He's more athletic than the Guerra. He has the want to and the tenacity as a blocker. He just simply does not have the size, and I'm not convinced that he'll ever be able to put that on. So, and that's kind of reflective in our board ranking. He isn't ranked. As a lot of these tight ends, we touched on it. There's a good crop of tight ends, but it's not great. He's not ranked in our top 50. I see him really as a late 2, early day 3 prospect, really in that end of round 3, maybe round 4 is really the sweet spot for me to see him come off the board. I see a team like maybe the Cincinnati Bengals that could use his services. Even the Patriots, as we talked about with Guerra, they know how to use athletes in space. The Jaguars could use a player like this with Gardner Minshew to be a reliable target underneath. The Washington Redskins, we all know Ron Rivera loves his tight ends. And they, with the loss of Jordan Reed, who he has some similarities with athletically, that could be a good fit in the Redskins or even the Eagles as that number 3 tight end develop. With Zach Ertz wanting a new contract, if you're not convinced to give him that, you want to move on with Dallas Goedert, maybe bring Bryant in as a number 3 until Ertz maybe goes on to another team for a bigger contract. His rookie year production, what you're going to be casting for him is that certain package. He's going to be your pass catcher. You're going to put him in space, mismatch him against smaller defensive backs in the slot, and really use that athleticism to burn smaller defenders. His career floor for me is really what I just said. Third down mismatch player, pass catcher, certain packages. His potential, if he can add a little bit of weight, he has the tenacity to have it, is a high-end athletic pass-catching tight end that's a starter. Like you said before, number 1 tight end. My player comp for him is Jonnu Smith, and that'd be the upside to where he can stay. He's similar size. They're not the tallest guy, but they're good athletes in space, can block at the second and third levels, and really, mismatch against the linebackers and safeties on third downs.
I like that player comp. He's a one-dimensional weapon that as a number 3 tight end, if you have a good offensive coordinator, a good head coach that runs the offense, that can scheme him into certain situations, he could be very productive as a number 3. If you have a good inline tight end, then maybe a number 2. But I definitely see him finding a role in the offense. And like you said, with tight ends prior, he might have to find himself a role on special teams, at least to start, prove that he can stay healthy, and then slowly work his way up the depth chart.
That's going to be my question to you, Roy, actually, about this gentleman is we know you've got to make a name when you're a tight end and you're talking about second or third in that position on your depth chart. Can he make an impact on special teams? Because you went out of your way and mentioned special teams with Guerra, and I didn't see it here in your write-up of Bryant.
Yeah, initially, I from the tape I viewed, I didn't see him get a lot of reps on special teams. Guerra did. He was on punt coverage teams and also kickoffs early in his career. Bryant really didn't have that benefit with the injuries that he really had contributed throughout his career at Washington. So there is that somewhat of a question. It's just his athletic profile is a little higher than Guerra. That's why I put him here at 4. But that is a question. Now, seeing his want-to and effort and the blocking department, I could see him, that translating well to special teams, especially maybe blocking on kick returns and maybe on coverage teams. But it's still a question mark. It's not something that it's a known commodity going into it.
All right.
Number 3, Harrison Bryant, tight end, Florida Atlantic.
All right, and this is one of my favorite pass catchers here. You're going to see a lot of similarities. Some of the other players we already touched on, but let's get into his accolades and maybe some stats about him. Bryant actually was not a highly recruited player coming out of high school, mostly because he was an offensive tackle in high school that converted only to tight end and as a pass catcher as a senior in Georgia. And in that one season as a senior in high school, he had 10 touchdown passes and averaged over 15 yards a catch. He immediately stepped into Boca Raton. He landed on the all-freshman team for Conference USA by playing 12 games for FAU. And he had 6 receptions, 63 yards, and he averaged over 10 yards a catch. Doesn't sound like much, but in that conference, there isn't a lot of production at the tight end. Then Bryant attacked it even more as a sophomore. He collected 408 yards on 32 passes. He had 10 starts, and he earned second-team all-conference honors. And then even his production increased even more as a junior. He had 45 receptions, over 600 yards receiving. He almost averaged 15 yards a catch. He had 4 touchdowns, and he became a first-team All-Conference USA pick. Then the cream of the crop was this past season. He not only repeated his first-team All-Conference selection as the previous year, he earned the AP All-American honor first-team tight end, and he won the John Mackey Award as the nation's top end for this past season. So he has some accolades on his shelf already. He led all tight ends nationally with 65 receptions for over 1,000 yards at over 15 yards a catch, and he scored 7 times in his 12 starts. Bryant was also fighting an illness that led up to his bowl game, so he didn't participate in it, but that's not a huge knock on it going forward. We were talking about Guerra's ability to use basketball-type fluidity in the open court. This guy has it. He takes that up another notch. His ability to get in and out of breaks is staggering. It's almost like a wide receiver in his ability to run routes intermediately. He offers a passing target to intermediate and deep levels of the field. He has really good speed. He has a nice burst that set up even cornerbacks and safeties in space. And he is a physical and nasty blocker. He doesn't have the bulk that you want in an inline guy, but man, is he scrappy. You've seen him consistently on tape get in people's faces and bury them at any opportunity possible. So, and he had some impressive outings against Ohio State. And he has the ability to go up over people, use that athleticism and his springs that are in his legs to go up and over and make them combat catches. He's a real interesting type player. He does technique-wise in run blocking. He's very sure in his hand placement and his ability to get what he has out of his build. So he might be at a disadvantage, but he'll give every ounce of strength that he has and effort in that blocking to make sure his assignment is sound. So, Jack, do you have any comments on Harrison Bryant here?
Yeah, I think he's kind of one of those versatile pieces that can get moved around. You know, you could throw him outside, inside. It's one of those versatile tight ends because of the athleticism you can do a lot with, especially inside the 20. I think that he can run, especially through the seam. He can run almost every seam route in the middle of the field. The intermediate routes he's really good with. Coming in and out of his breaks, he's just a very fluid athlete. Like we said, he can do a little bit of everything. He's not the biggest, bulkiest tight end. He's almost a slight undersized tight end, but it's not due to lack of effort for the blocking. You know, he puts every ounce of physical talent or physical strength that he's got into it. But yeah, he looks like to me an undersized linebacker, not necessarily a tight end build. But when you see him on the field, him high pointing the ball, you know, very consistent at the point of attack, you know, and catching the ball, high pointing. I'm very intrigued to see what he can do at the next level if given, you know, a really good quarterback and a good system that knows how to utilize his strengths.
Yeah, and just to touch a little bit on his weaknesses there, great points, Jack. He's similar to Hunter Bryant. I'm not sure he can add a lot more bulk, but his tenacity is another step up from Bryant in the blocking department. He actually can block in line due to his effort and want to. He also needs to continually improve his ability to shield away defenders and make combat catches. He'll have a focus drop here and there. So that's really his knocks. It's just the bulk and some drops and some here and there things that he needs to tighten up. So he doesn't have a lot of weaknesses, but he also has some really good traits. It's just he might not have the build to continually keep building off of them as he refines himself. And the Blitzalytics big board kind of reflects that. He's also not ranked in our top 50. I see him as a day 2 prospect, a solid day 2 prospect in the round 3 range. Teams such as the Packers, a lot of these teams were repeating. Packers could use another tight end. The Patriots could definitely use him with his ability to, you know, run routes almost like a receiver. It would give them a guy like that they haven't had since the NFL type Aaron Hernandez, not his off the field issues, but Aaron Hernandez-esque in his ability to run routes. The Bears could definitely use him in a similar manner as Trey Burton if his health doesn't hold up. And one interesting place that I'd like to see him is the Arizona Cardinals. They have Max Williams, who plays a little bit all over the formation, but to add this pass catcher to their allotment they already have would be interesting. as well as the Dallas Cowboys. They have Blake Jarwin, who's a little bit of a better blocker, not as good as an athlete as this guy. He could be that number 2, second fiddle type to Blake Jarwin, who they just re-signed out there.
Yeah, I see him being more of a tight end too. We talked about these last guys, having to find roles on special teams. I don't think that that's going to happen. He's definitely going to insert himself, and I think we'll have some rookie production. Typically, it takes, we know that 3-year curve for a tight end, for wide receivers, for pass catchers in general. I see especially if he goes to a Cliff Kingsbury offense, he could find year 1 production real quick.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. If he goes to Arizona, that would be an ideal fit for his skill set. Rookie year production, we all basically talked about it. Third down pass catcher and special teams contributor will really be where it is unless he goes to a spread system to where he could be utilized in space. His floor I see as a number 2 tight end, a high-end number 2 tight end, maybe a low-grade starter. And his ceiling potential, if he can get a little bit more bulk, his effort and want to, and his pass-catching ability, I could see him being a top 10 tight end in the league just due to his pass-catching ability, his ability to put up some numbers in production that way. And his player comp that I can see right now is Irv Smith Jr., that was selected by Minnesota last year. Similar body types, similar skill sets. So Irv Smith Jr.
Let me ask you this then about that, and only because a few of the words you used to describe him kind of got the bell ringing a little bit about Jimmy Graham. You started talking about basketball traits, right? And then you brought up the Bears as a potential destination. I know a lot of Bears fans are sour on that giant contract they just gave Jimmy, but do you think that he could be the kind of mentor to this specific player who does kind of fit some of those traits and maybe speed up progress as a landing spot? I know you love the one with Kingsbury. I'm intrigued with the Bears, though.
Yeah, that would actually be a great fit for him if they were able to get him at the end of the 3rd round or even the 4th round to where they can place him behind. Because we all know the Bears love their tight ends. Matt Nagy comes from a system similar to Philadelphia where they love a lot of different variety of tight ends in a lot of different roles. He'd be an excellent fit to learn behind Jimmy Graham. He doesn't have the same build as Jimmy Graham because Graham is taller, bigger body type, but they win in similar ways horizontally with their athleticism. Graham is a better vertical target due to his size. It's just Bryant is a better, I think, fluidity type in between the horizontal, the numbers, winning in the intermediate areas. So that'd be a good fit because they're similar types in pass catching only, but he has way more want-to as a blocker than Jimmy Graham has ever shown me.
Sorry, plus because of the fact that he's just a better athlete all around. I mean, yeah, Graham he doesn't take the top off the defense, but he's been a deep threat because he's so tall and so lengthy. But I think Harrison Bryant can get up just as high as Jimmy Graham can if they're trying to high point the ball. I would say he's already a better route runner.
Right, that's specifically why I asked. You guys mentioned a lot of traits that are basketball player-esque, and that's what reminded me of Jimmy back in the, watching him play basketball. That's what the description sounded a lot like to me.
And that could be his first-year role to where maybe he's in that type of a role. Like if he goes to the Bears and Jimmy Graham's being the vertical seam route, especially in a red zone type area, if he's running a straight 9 route in the red zone and you let him do a corner route, that'd be a definite good fit and a good comparison to an early body type Jimmy Graham, not what he is right now.
Number 2, Albert Okoye Bounnam.
All right. Albert Okoye Bounnam is a tight end out of Missouri. He's 21 years old. He played as a redshirt freshman in 2017. He was a second-team All-SEC and SEC All-Freshman team pick after scoring 11 touchdowns on only 29 catches that year. He was an absolute force his first year. He then started the first 9 games of his sophomore season, accruing 43 pass catches for just under 500 yards, averaging just under 11 yards a catch and 6 touchdowns, but unfortunately he missed the Final Four contest with a shoulder injury. He also was considering coming out in last year's draft as that sophomore season, and he ultimately decided to come back. Okoye Bounnam then started 9 of 11 games in 2019, missing some time again due to that shoulder injury. He was second team All SEC. And he also scored a team-high 6 receiving touchdowns on that year, averaging just under 12 yards a clip. Fun fact for everybody, Okoye Bounnam, his last name is very unique, and his name actually means eagle cannot bring us down. So fun fact to throw out there for all your draft friends. I absolutely love this prospect. He's one of the 2 players in here that I see as a quality number 1 starting tight end. He's a good combination of size and speed. He flashes some tempo in his route. He shows some ability to sell his routes even for a big man. It doesn't take a lot for him to get in and out of his routes. He's physical at the point of attack and blocking. He also has the size to overwhelm defenders when he goes up over them. He has long arms, great hands. He just has his ball skills are impressive. He has a wide frame when he is blocking to be able to control and steer defenders. He's just a really impressive all-around tight end. He doesn't have the elite athleticism and elite quickness as maybe Bryant or Guerra have in space, but his size makes up for that fluidity lackness here. Jack, you have anything?
Sorry, I keep messing with my mic. He's a little bit more of a, like you said, a clunky athlete. He's a little slower getting off the line, a little bit more of a physical tight end than he is a speed guy or somebody who can get open with athleticism. He's more so along those lines of a Gronk, that he's never going to fly by anybody, but physically he can go get the ball just as well as anybody else can. He's tall, he's got the length, he's got good quality hands, he can get up, he's got a good vertical. Everything about this guy to me says number 1 tight end. And again, it's not like every tight end really, I mean, minus this guy that we have at number 1, has been asked to pass block, has been asked to inline block. So that's something that they have to learn at the next level. It's not something that just comes from college football, because very, very rarely are they asked to do that. So you can't knock them for something that any of these guys are rarely asked to do. But that being said, he is one of the better blockers, and because he's got the build, he's got the frame, he has the potential to be the better blocker from 5 to 2.
Yeah, he's one of the few guys in this draft that you can project to a wide tight end, the inline, and be able to play all 3 downs. If you want to, he's athletic enough to keep on the field on 3rd downs as a pass catcher and a mismatch as a size player. And there's not a lot in this class that project to that type of role. So I really like his athleticism. It's good enough to be a starting caliber tight end. And I just really like him all around in his blocking and just his physical makeup. Like, he has that alpha mentality when the ball's in the air that he's going to come down with it. So Albert Okoye Bounnam, you get my stamp of approval as number 2 here. But his knocks are that he just don't have a great athleticism, even though he tested well at the combine. I'm not so sure he runs up to that standard. He just has really good speed on tape. Doesn't have the greatest quickness, but it's the size and the overwhelming factor, similar to a Gronk, as you said. Not saying he is Gronk, but that type of body type in that player. He isn't ranked on our big board as most of these tight ends, as I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I see him as a solid day 2 player. Late round 2, if you're looking for a team that really needs a starting caliber tight end, early round 3, that's where I see him coming off the board.
What are the teams you can go to?
I really like his fit with the Dallas Cowboys. I think he would be a quality tight end, outlet receiver for Dak Prescott to team up with Blake Jarwin. I love that combination. Also, the Steelers, who need a younger tight end to come in. I know they signed Ebron as an athletic pass catcher. Vance McDonald can't stay healthy. They need somebody that can come in and inject a little bit of athleticism and be able to be up inline blocker while he's using it. So the Steelers are one. The Redskins could use more talented tight end. They have a guy from the Colts they signed who they were impressed with late in the season, Hal Henkes, who's a quality tight end. I think really was slept on last year's draft. But outside of that, they don't have a lot of talent. So the Redskins, the Jaguars are another one that could use another quality tight end, especially in line, and the Patriots as well, just because of the size similarity to Gronk. If you're looking for an inline presence run blocker, and also an overwhelming, pass catcher that can go over top defenders. That would be a good fit there. My projected year one production for rookie would be a high-end number 2 tight end. I think he has the ability to come in right away and at least contribute as a blocker while flashing his skill set in the red zone as a pass catcher. So a high-end number 2 in that rotation. And that's where I see his floor at, is a quality number 2. Top 5 tight end is his upside, just because his ability to overwhelm defenders with his good speed and athleticism and his want-to in the blocking department. Kind of what you were saying in Gronk-like. But my player comp for him, I'm going way back into the annals of history, and I'm not sure if a lot of people are going to get this comp. It's Eric Green of the Steelers. He was an overwhelming type pass catcher back in the early 1990s. Good athleticism, especially back for that time. He was kind of a trendsetter before his time as that pass catching type tight end. So Eric Green, if you don't know him, go back and look it up. This guy kind of reminds me similarly of his build.
Yeah, I would say maybe a Jordan Reed if we're trying to go new, without the injury history. A Gronk-esque again, like we both alluded to. But I do really like Redskins, Patriots, Jags. Those are some really good ones. Cowboys could use an inline blocking tight end. They no longer have Jason Witten, so I think you hit home runs on your team fits.
Well, I got a couple of things here. First off, Cowboys, don't forget a couple years ago, they stole Dallas Goedert from you in Philly. So now you got to go and get the tight end whose name means what again, Roy?
His last name, Okoye Bounnam, means eagle cannot bring us down.
Tell me that's not perfect, Cowboys fans. You absolutely need to make that happen. But earlier in another episode, Roy, you talked previously about weighing negatives that are coachable versus negatives that aren't. Would you say most of this guy's weaknesses are coachable and you can trust that he will advance, or that he's kind of what you're getting right now?
I mean, he does have some technical refinement that he needs, especially as a route runner. I think he can improve his route running ability. But his physical side, I'm not so sure he's ever going to get faster or quicker. His ability to maybe use some savviness that he learns from some of the veterans to be able to get open in and out of his routes could improve, especially with a tight end coach. It's very nuanced in that approach. But I think his athletic upside is maybe hit its top right here, guys. His athleticism, I think, is going to be as best of what it will ever be right now. But I think his technical aspects can be improved upon.
Yeah, I would say the footworks, the mechanics, getting in and out of his breaks can definitely be cleaned up. There's a lot of wasted steps in terms of his route running. So if he can clean that up, he could be a solid number 2, if not eventual number 1 tight end. Somebody who definitely can be used when you get closer to the goal line, like I've been saying. It's one of those things. Again, they don't ask a whole lot in college. It always takes tight ends to acclimate to the NFL because they aren't taught the proper technique. They aren't given the all-pro, the who's who of tight end coaches. So once he gets to the next level, you're going to see a huge jump in technique and refinement and fluidity, because he's very choppy with his footwork, and you see that in the film.
And what was impressive about him is he was utilized in a couple different schemes throughout his time at Missouri. He went from more of a spread scheme with Drew Lock to more of a inline type role here in 2019. They switched some offensive coordinators, and he's been in a couple different systems already. So in 2018 and his freshman season, he was a lot better pass catcher than what you've seen on film this past year, just because he was used in different varieties.
Number 1, Adam Troutman, Dayton.
So we're getting to the cream of the crop. If you're looking for a tight end this year, you want to write this name down the card and hope somebody else doesn't beat you to the draft stand or wherever it's going to be this year, online, whatnot. He's 23 years of age. He's a former high school quarterback from Michigan that won the Scout Team Offensive Player of the Year during his freshman season, during his redshirt season in 2015. He became an offensive weapon in his first year on the field, lining up a tight end and in the slot and even wildcat quarterback in 11 games He had 24 receptions and 3 touchdowns, just under 10 yards in average here. His next 2 seasons, then, he led the Dayton Flyers in receiving and was named second team all-conference, both with 5 touchdowns in the season and then following up with 9 touchdowns in 2018, both averaging over 12.5 and then 14.7 yards a game. Then, Adam Troutman this past season was the first team Associated Press FCS All-American and Pioneer League Offensive Player of the Year because of his production. He had a ridiculous 70 receptions for 916 yards and 14 touchdowns. Yeah, that's right, 14 touchdowns that ranked him 5th nationally in the FCS. This guy is the best tight end, hands down, in this class. Nobody can match his combination of athleticism and blocking prowess. When I originally went into watching his tape, I wasn't so sure that he was going to have any type of refined ability in the run blocking department, but I came out quite impressed. His tenacity, his effort, his technique with shooting his hands inside off the whistle and then chopping his feet and pushing people where he basically wanted, whether that was just because of his size advantage at this level. He is an absolute stud in the run blocking department. He showed an ability in the pass pro department on a few snaps that he was able to, with his ability to use light feet and be able to kick, slide, and mirror pass rushers. He was able to run them wide of the arc of the quarterback. It was very impressive. Out of all these tight ends, he was probably the only one I've seen be able to have that type of athleticism. And now let's get to the pass catching part. This guy, if you want to talk about a Gronk type or Gronk light pass catching ability, his ability to sky over players and make contested catches was outstanding. He was able to use body control and make toe-tapping catches along the sidelines. He was a red zone target. As I just mentioned, he had 14 touchdowns, and he just has a nasty playing demeanor after the catch. He'll run you over, but he also has the quickness to run away from you. He has enough top-end speed to be a seam stretcher, and he's a former basketball player, knows how to use leveraging and also be able to box out defenders in short spaces. So this guy, there's not a lot of weaknesses in my opinion to his game. For a small school guy, the only basic concern I have going in is that adjustment in competition. But when we were down at the Senior Bowl, this guy was unguardable in the practices. He was one of the most impressive, in my opinion, seeing him live. One, in his blocking drills, he always showed that tenacity and that effort and that mean streak. And then he was just able to secure passes away from his frame quite impressively.
Yeah, I mean, when we seen him down in Mobile, best tight end in the draft class, bar none. What he can do is extreme. He's extremely underrated as an inline blocker, as a pass catcher, and if people, I can't believe that people aren't on this bandwagon. And I guess it's kudos to us to being one of the first ones. I know I followed you onto this train, but Troutman is just a beast. The most well-rounded tight end there is in this class. His athleticism from a 0 to 60 standpoint may not be there, but what he's able to do from a route running, what he's able to do from route concepts and understanding where to sit in zones, they asked him to do a little bit of everything, to pass block, to run block, to get out and run up the seam. He lines up out wide at times. There's nothing he can't do, and it gets me very excited when you have a versatile tight end. Because when you have a versatile tight end, you're not showing your hand. You're not proving, you're not showing that you're just going to run or you're just going to pass. It allows the offense to stay, to keep their cards hidden or close to the chest. And what he's going to be able to do at the next level is round one talent ability. Will he go in the first round? I do not know. I'll leave that up to you, Roy.
Let me interrupt you guys, actually, because this episode has been good. I'm not trying to knock it, but the excitement in both your voices is palpable with this guy. If he were to come out last year, was it last year that we had Fant and Hawkinson, right? Where would you have stuck him amongst those guys? Because I didn't hear this level of excitement last year from you guys talking about either of those cats.
For me, I'm a hard one to ask about that because I was not a fan of Noah Fant last year. But I actually like TJ Hawkinson a lot better than Troutman. But the basketball background and the underrated knowledge of a former quarterback going to be a tight end is very underrated with his ability to understand what the quarterback wants you to do when you're running your route. That's really a key thing that most people don't look into for your tight end. If they're a converted quarterback, that's a great knowledge base just to have. So for me, it would be tucked in right behind TJ Hawkinson, just because I think Hawkinson's blocking ability is a step above where Troutman is right now.
I 100% agree. I was not a fan of Noah Fant at all. I think it was idiotic for him to be picked where he was by the Denver Broncos. I'm sure they're looking at that now, wishing they had a Devin Bush and not a Noah Fant. Noah Fant's going to be a rotational tight end. He's not somebody who's ever going to be able to inline block like Troutman will. So he would have been a solid number 2 on our tight end big board rankings last season. And I mean, he would be top 2, top 3 in the last probably 3 or 4 or 5 draft classes as a tight end.
Yeah, he's a quality tight end. I haven't seen even the pass protecting aspect of a lot of tight ends and what he was able to do in tape when I was studying him. So with that and the athletic background, the things you can't teach, that's why I'm so high on Troutman right now. And for him, I just see the sky is the limit. And he's an early day 2 prospect. You were alluding to, would he go late round 1? I could see it if somebody's desperate for a starting tight end. But I really see him in that first 10 to 15 picks of the round 2. You're going to see him go off the board just because he's at a different level than the rest of the crop of tight ends. So if you don't get Troutman in the second round, you're going to probably wait maybe for a Guerra or maybe for a Clemente later on in the draft to just get a guy that you can hope to develop and have a specific role for him. Whereas Troutman, you can use him in a variety of ways, and he's going to excel in a lot of different ways. Inline, flex, tight end, even as a fullback on some plays, you could use him as a counter trap lead blocker because of his nastiness that he has. So I really see him as that quality day 2 player, and he won't get out of the second round. If he does, somebody's getting a steal. The Patriots are the number 1 team I look at for him. He'd be a great fit for that team. The Cowboys as well, the Jaguars. My Steelers, I would love for him to come to the Steelers and be able to develop behind a pass catcher like Ebron, but also a player like Vance McDonald who has that nasty type of finishing and a playing demeanor with his stiff arm. If he could learn behind him for a year and be that number 3 tight end, or maybe even fill in if he's injured, those are all quality fits right there for him. Also, Miami, because Mike Gesicki is nothing to write home about. He's kind of underwhelmed as a pass catcher, and outside of him, they do not have a lot of talent. So if they get a young quarterback, that could also be a place in that early round 2 area where you could see a fit for them.
Yeah.
My year 1, go ahead.
Go for it.
My year 1 projection for him is a day 1 starter. If you're looking for him and you're going to be selecting him in the second round, you're going to want to immediately deploy him because he's that much better than the rest of the crop. So you're most likely going to have him as a day 1 starter. Maybe a Cincinnati as well that's looking for a tight end. If not, he'll be a quality number 2 that's going to get a lot of reps early on just because of his ability to impact a lot of different ways. His career floor, to me, is at lowest a high number 2 because of his pass catching ability and his blocking demeanor. And his upside to me is top 3 starter in the NFL. I just love his upside with his understanding, of what it takes to win, his ability to be aggressive at the catch point, his ability to win short and intermediate routes, get yards after the catch, and also effect in run blocking. So if you can do all those type of things, you're going to be one of the best all-around combination tight ends in all the NFL. So, Jack, I'll let you jump in there before I get my player comp.
Oh, I was going to go and play off of your player comp, so go for it.
All right, so my player comp for him is a guy, Greg Olson, one of the great combination tight ends of our last decade. He's really good and physical in the run blocking department. He's a sure pass catcher. I actually think Troutman may be more relatable to his early career. At this point, he's kind of regressing a little bit athletically, but he will always be that dependable target, will get a lot of production, be a red zone target, and be that driving force on third downs that your quarterbacks always are looking for.
So I think I do like it, but I think a younger Greg Olson was a little bit more athletic than Troutman. I would lean towards Ceiling being more of a Jason Witten type, which we know Jason Witten's, Hall of Fame quality or potential Hall of Famer. And then I would say the floor for him is still going to be a Cameron Brate from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a solid number 2, a good inline blocker, and somebody that if he gets tied to a tight end friendly quarterback could have a illustrious career and put up some big numbers as a number 2 or even a number 1 if he is, like I said, low end Cam Brate, high end Jason Witten, or Greg Olson, which is Hall of Fame caliber. So you heard it here first. We're saying this man has Hall of Fame like potential at the tight end position.
Yeah, those are outstanding comps, Jack. I like both of them. Go ahead, Rob.
Because I'm interested in both of your guys' here. So my question I have specifically for him, and then I do have a couple of questions overall about the class that I'd like to get into before we get to the superlatives. But first, if wide receiver wasn't so thick this season, would we be talking about him as a low-end 1, or could we still be? Because, again, correct me if I'm wrong, New England lost their second rounder in the Sanu deal, didn't they? So maybe pull the trigger on him late in the first, something like that?
They could definitely drop back and pull that trigger like they always seem to do. I do think, and this was one point I was going to make, we did see TJ Hawkinson go inside the top 10 last year, and that had to do with he had every intangible. He checked every box, inline blocker, length, size, speed, athleticism, catch ability, catch radius, all this stuff. And Troutman, although isn't to that level, I do think that because of how stacked this draft class is with overall talent, period, just all around, I mean, talent on the defense side of the ball, the offensive tackles, the ridiculous amount of wide receivers that we're likely going to see go. There's going to be at least 4, 5, maybe even 6 wide receivers that go in the first round. You have a couple cornerbacks, some safeties in the back end of that first round. So I think talent-wise, he is reason why he's dropping. If we were talking about last year's class, he'd probably be a top 15, top 20 pick. He would definitely be drafted where Noah Fant was last year.
Yeah, that for me, it's just this class has so much quality depth in a lot of positions that are of high value. And are you going to take a tackle that has a high upside over a tight end? No. You're going to take a tackle that's harder to find, more important in blocking your franchise quarterback. It's really positional need. And the other thing I want to say here, too, I think it's also a little bit of bias against a small school player. If he would have been in a similar situation to Hawkinson, where he went to a program like Iowa, I think he would be a lock to be a top 20 pick, at least the top 20 pick, because of his athleticism, and he would have more refinement in a lot of his technique. He has really good technique as of right now, but he'd be at a more advanced stage of his development if he was at a program like that. So I think it's a little bit of bias being that he's coming from a smaller school, but I definitely agree with Jack. If it would have been a case last year, if it would have been Fant or Troutman, it's no doubt it's Troutman. He would have been a better all-around prospect. It would have been Hawkinson, Troutman, and Fant, and you probably wouldn't see Fant in the first round. But he's just a real quality player, and I want to see. I'm really intrigued. I would not be surprised if he sneaks into the end of the first round. But you brought up a really fun idea, and that's New England always seems to, if they don't have a guy that they like where they're at, they'll drop down and pick up more picks. And being that they have a less amount of allotment of picks with the Sanu trade and some of the other moves they made, it wouldn't be surprising to see them pull that move within the first 5 picks of the second round, trade back, pick Troutman, and be able to have a young pass catcher for Jared Stidham or Brian Hoyer, whoever the quarterback's going to be, to rely upon after having no depth or no quality of talent at all on that roster last year. To be able to insert a guy like this for that next phase of the offensive, evolution.
And I think another thing that could hurt his draft stock is that towards the back end of the first round, you still have day one starters who are going to make an impact as a rookie. We even seen with someone who has unlimited potential in TJ Hawkinson, even dating back to OJ Howard. Rookie years for tight ends just do not produce. And so
the only one I can think of is Evan Ingram, and it was extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, because he was the only weapon left on the team. So it's one of those things, unless it's to that extent and it's out of desperation, he's not going to have a day one week one, year one impact. I mean, we've seen TJ Hawkinson lit it up in week one, and then we didn't see him really at all ever since.
For the rest of the season, for sure.
We all know that from a fantasy perspective.
Something that was originally tossed around at the combine while we were all together, so I want to bring it in here. If we touched a little bit on him in the wide receiver episode, but if he was to be listed as a tight end, where would Claypool rank right now for you in this list? and are we talking about the first guy in the top 50 here at that position?
That is a very interesting conversation. To me, just because he's never played the position, he would be number 2. But that's saying with the outlier of saying his upside, I think, would be even higher than Troutman. And I love Troutman coming into this draft. He would be an absolute freak athlete at the tight end position, which quite possibly he could be transitioning with, as Jim Nagy alluded to in one of his tweets. Him showing up to the combine at 238 kind of maybe was a little bit of an answer to the whispers and maybe some of the scouts that had questions at the Senior Bowl if he would be open to it. And then he comes out and runs the 40 time he did and blows up the combine, and it kind of puts that on the back burner. But at the same case, I'm not so sure he plays up to that on the tape. So his physicality would be definitely in line with a tight end. He could block in line, and he has the technique and the want to. And he'd probably be a better blocker than everybody on this list outside of Troutman and Okoye Bounnam right now as a tight end, just because of his size and his skill set. But his upside would be absolutely enormous with that pass-catching ability, his athletic profile. I would be really intrigued, and it would make me consider taking within the first 50 picks if he committed to be a tight end full-time.
I think teams are just going to look at him, or a team should look at him as just a dual threat. You know, he can play both. He just call him a tweener if you want to. Treat him like one. Maybe ask him to add another 5 pounds, get into that 240, 245 range. Oh, how much is that really going to hurt his 40 time? Really, like it's still better than 80, 90, 95% of the linebackers and safeties that would have to face him anyways. So, to me, the upside would be up there. I think if he was to commit to playing tight end, his upside would be higher than any tight end we've seen come out of the draft in the last 5 to 10 years. And that's from somebody who drafted O.J. Howard on their, or not, I didn't draft him, but, as a Bucs fan, I would say that it's on par with an O.J. Howard, if not surpasses that from a insanely high ceiling in terms of potential. I think, though, teams should look at him as both. Why not be able to use him as in the slot on third down? Just because it says TE or it says wide receiver does not mean that you can't line him up anywhere. Just because he hasn't been asked to chip defensive linemen doesn't mean he can't. He's got the technique. We've seen him body defensive back after defensive back after defensive back in Mobile. So I think this is one of those things that we would have to have our own episode just to really talk about this and really hit every key point, because there's so much potential and so many talking points to get to. As a massive Chase Claypool fan, I know the Bucs really don't have a necessity for tight ends or even big wide receivers at this point, but he's a guy you just want on your team, especially if you have a somebody who can make, I'm trying to think of the right term, somebody with an imagination that can figure out where to put him at all times.
Right, a certain level of creativity.
That's the word I was looking for. Sorry.
Right. One more question for Jack, and then one for the both of you, and then we'll finish up here with your superlative lists. Jack, you're the O-line guru. Any of these guys out here get you salivating like I can just plug that guy at the end of my line and know that he's just an extra O lineman out here?
Troutman for sure. That's the thing, is he seals the edge for, like, he allows you to have 6 guys, and especially if you have a good pass catching running back that can come out of the backfield, he can seal a line for a bad offensive line. So that's where teams should look at him. And if they do have a weak they're weak at least one side of the tackle position, he helps out tremendously. If you have a bad offensive line, if you have 1 or 2 bad offensive linemen, a pass blocking or a good blocking tight end pays dividends when you're able to protect the quarterback, even if it is just a chip, even if it is just getting a hand on a defensive end or an edge rusher to make sure you got an extra half a second for your quarterback.
And last one here, keeping in mind in 2017 he was a 5th round draft selection. Is there a George Kittle in this draft, a guy who in 3 years, if I told you he was the best tight end football, you really wouldn't be shocked? Is there a 4th, 5th, 6th rounder who you think could eventually get to that level?
Oh, man. Well, I'll give you 2 names for sleepers to keep a hold of, and they did not make my superlative list, and for 2 different reasons. But I like their all-around skill set. You'll probably see him selected on day 3 in the round 5 to 7 area. The first one is Cheyenne O'Grady from Arkansas. He is a really good pass catcher. He's got some nastiness in his blocking. He just has a lot of off-the-field questions to answer for. He wound up agreeing to, basically, because he was kicked off of Arkansas, but they agreed to mutually part ways at the end of his senior season. But he has an excellent feel for being able to get open. He has really good hands. He has really good athleticism if you watch him. So Cheyenne O'Grady's the name to keep a hold of. And also a guy that got bit by the injury bug this year after finally getting a chance to be the starter and really be a pivotal piece of the offense, and that's Jacob Breeland from Oregon. He has a well-rounded skill set. He's a really good blocker. He knows how to win his routes late. He understands how to set himself up in soft zones, and he also is really good at bodying out and boxing out players to give a target to his quarterback on key downs. So those are 2 names of guys to keep an eye on late. They both have some question marks on why they didn't make it in any of my superlatives or even the top 5. And that's Jacob Breeland because of injury. He had a leg injury late in the season here that took him out for the rest of the season, and Cheyenne O'Grady because of off-the-field issues.
All right, let's jump to those superlatives.
All right, my superlatives, we're going to go through these quick. The blocker is Sean McKeon from Michigan. He has a pretty well-rounded skill set. He was able to be an inline blocker and also used as a fullback on some plays for Michigan. So he's just versatile. He's a really good blocker. That's pretty much anything he'll contribute is that part, and he's a good special teams guy. So blocker, his versatility is Sean McKeon there. Hands, I had to throw him in here. He's probably one of the best set of hands, and it comes naturally because of his father, Thaddeus Moss from LSU. Right outside of my top 5, my tight ends. Outstanding ability to pluck away from his frame, even though he doesn't have a big frame. And he has some injury questions in his past. Thaddeus Moss with best hands outside of the top 5.
I really wish he had a wide receiver build. He's not thick. He's too thick to be a wide receiver. A little thin for a tight end. But man, I just wish he had his dad's frame because what could have been, you never know. He's still going to be one of those red zone threats for sure at the next level.
Yeah, he's like my number 6 tight end. He was hard to keep off of this list due to his bloodlines and his ability, especially in one season, to show a lot of production as a blocker. He has a lot of want-to as a blocker, but McKeon's a little better. That's why he wasn't there. But his hands are simply natural and can pluck it. So seam stretching tight end outside of top 5 is another LSU tight end we've seen down in Mobile, Stephen Sullivan. He's really a big-bodied receiver, just outside playing tight end. He played a lot in the slot and just as a flex. Doesn't have the build to be in line whatsoever, but he has the speed and the hands and the length to be a pass catcher. So he's somebody you got to count for running down seam routes there. Route runner, and this is another guy that's a really intriguing prospect right outside of my top 5, and that's Bryson Hopkins from Purdue. He's a really good athlete. He's a really good route runner. Not much of a blocker per se, but he's a really good pass catcher with the onus on saying that he needs to tighten up the consistency with catching the ball. He is too prone to drop too many focus drops. So route running, he can get open. It's just he's not reliable 100% of the time when he is open to secure the catch. And my all-time sleeper from the draft, and it's just due to versatility, and it's a guy I had to throw out there just to tell his story a little bit, and we're going to just name him versatility fullback. He actually played more of an option running back at Kennesaw State. His name is none other than Bronson Recksteiner. And if you kind of recognize the last part of his last name, it's because of his dad and his uncle, who were former WCW wrestling tag team champions, Scott and Rick Steiner. This is Rick Steiner's son, and he is built like his uncle, Scott Steiner, Big Papa Pump. This guy is well put together. He can run the football. He's quite an impressive pass catcher if you watch some of his film. And he never really played fullback full time. But if you let this guy be a kamikaze on special teams, his playing demeanor and his overall skill set would be really enticing for me to be tucked down at the end of my roster as the 53rd man in a John Kuhn role, possibly back from the Green Bay Packers.
I will tell you what, we were in Indy together and you showed me the video on YouTube. I had taken a note to ask you about him in this since we're not going to cover fullbacks. And Jack can attest, the guy looked like a little bullet, right? He'd run in the pile and just bang, all of a sudden he'd be out and speeding down the field. It's impressive. So I'm going to ask that Roy find that again and put the link up on at least the Twitter, his personal Twitter, because it was an impressive watch. I'm not going to lie.
We'll make sure to put that in the comment section or down below in the description of the video. I knew you were gonna find a way to get him in here. I knew you would. I just had a feeling, and then I scroll all the way down to the bottom of the there he is. I knew this was coming. You had to talk about him, didn't you?
Hey, when a guy has that great of a story, and then you watch his tape, and you're like, "Holy crap! Okay, yeah, I see some impressive traits here. Like, I'm not just blowing smoke here. You guys both can attest. He has some traits that." You know, why would you not want this guy being your kamikaze on special teams, going down trying to wreak some havoc and then be a lead blocker? Them guys are crazy anyway for wanting to run into linebackers 35, 45 times a game.
I've never actually said this. He's got a little Mike Allstott to him.
Ooh.
He does. I mean, he can. He's athletic. He's big and strong. He's not as big as Mike Allstott in terms of overall size. Width-wise, maybe, but size-wise, no. But he's got a little bit to him. I mean, he can catch the ball. He can run the ball. I mean, I've actually seen him, break an ankle or two on those. I mean, he wants to bully and run straight through people, but he's athletic enough to make some moves in the open field, and you've seen that. So definitely recommend watching that. And if you are a wrestling fan like some of the guys here at Blitzalytics, you'll definitely be rooting for him. He's going to be a fan favorite here real quick. Well, I guess that wraps this on up.
Thank you for watching. Remember to hit like and subscribe and press the notification button to be notified when we drop more top 5 positional rankings.
Blitz out.